Hello and welcome to Pretty Nerdy. I'm Derek, the co-host, and I am here as always with the lovely Pretty Guardian. Pretty Guardian, how you doing today?
I am doing so well and so excited to be talking to you again. It's been a hot minute since our last episode.
Absolutely, it's been too long, and if you're confused as to what's going on here, this is a follow-up conversation to our previous podcast episode where we talked about Baldurs Gate before it was released. So this is a kind of like 50 hours in. There's so much to discuss, partially because of how much of the game there is to discuss is why we haven't been doing these episodes as frequently. I also was on vacation. I went out to New York. I went out to see family in Michigan. It was a good time, but I gotta say, every time I even heard so much as like, "Oh look, Jerry's going bald," and my brain was like, "Baldur's Gate. How's Shadowheart doing? Oh God!" I was going through the withdrawals because I plunged so many hours into this game. But we did say on our last episode that we wanted to do like a 50-hour kind of catch-up to see where we were, thoughts on the game as a whole. If you want to hear about what we thought about the game before it was released, like the excitement, it's actually a really fun episode. I go back and listen to it every so often, so please go do that. What was your anticipation going in? Because you are our resident Larian Studios, shall I say, savant. As somebody who didn't play the alpha, what was your expectations going in, and what were your thoughts?
So, like you said, I didn't play the alpha. I wanted to play that like day one version where it had maybe had a little more updating behind it and everything before my opinion of it started to form there. And so I was very excited to play this game. I had this like little shred of like skepticism inside me just because this was such an ambitious project in so many ways. And Larian did not disappoint me. Not at all. I don't even know how to begin. They just exceeded every expectation. It's truly a phenomenal game. I can see myself playing it for years to come. Even just finishing like my first playthrough, I got to the end and I was like looking back on all the decisions I had made and I was like, man, I'm like ready for round two of this. It's just such a good game. And I do have some criticisms in there as well, but just considering how wonderful the final project turned out to be, the criticisms are nothing in comparison.
I honestly couldn't agree more. I did play the alpha, so I was excited, and I had a very high level of expectation, which was basically met the second I turned on Character Generator. The fact that Leary was just like, "Oh yeah, by the way, here's a bunch of new stuff and stuff you're not used to seeing." So I was so on board. Do you want to talk about the negatives first and get those out of the way?
Well, so one of the negatives for me was that I felt like there were a lot of bugs in the game. Not to the point of it being unplayable by any means. Like with the character Minthara, there was the whole issue with her voice lines not triggering. And fortunately, that one was updated and fixed. I ran into a lot of like weird stuff. My game client crashed. Certain character models would freeze into place and then duplicates of them would appear in like fights and stuff. Just a lot of like really weird little, I'd almost call them quirks, but I definitely respect how Larian is continuing to update the game. So I feel like a lot of those will be ironed out within the next year.
So I got to admit, like, all those bugs you just mentioned, I've never seen.
Well, that's fantastic.
The bugs that I do run across are like spelling error bugs. I see those all the time at work, so I'm used to seeing those. I think the most prevalent one I have right now is when I put on plate armor specifically on a dragonborn body, a piece of the arm material keeps stretching, like mid cutscene, and it's very distracting. It just stretches and then comes back and then stretches and then comes back. All it's a little weird. But, like, that's the biggest bug I've come across. I'm on my solo playthrough, I'm playing a paladin. I've noticed that becoming an Oathbreaker is a little too easy. I don't know. I was at the end of the second act, where you're freeing the gnomes from the slavers, and as I'm murdering slaver scum, like midway through, I get a message from the Oathbreaker Paladin. You have broken your oath. I'm like, excuse me? I'm freeing slaves. How am I breaking my oath? Breaking your oath. And there was like no indication. It felt like there was no reason that this should be happening right now. And I don't know if that was an actual bug or if it was if I triggered something by like, you killed 100 people, so now you get this. It's like, this doesn't seem like the time.
Does not seem like the time, does it?
That's just me. Another issue I had was like something very, very minuscule. Was like I don't like their for paladins. When you use your spells, your only indication that you're using up all of your spells is like your box for that spell slot gets a little bit more red until it's full.
They should have given a clearer indicator on that.
And to me, I'd like to see like maybe like a number that, hey, you're running out of Divine Smites. You might want to cool it on that. What about you? Anything else?
Looking at the third act of the game, I definitely think that it also had less polish than the first act. There were a lot of storylines that didn't feel like they resolved in a satisfactory sort of way. And I just feel like that portion of the game could probably use a little more work.
I gotta say that I think I agree with that, because when you walk into Baldur's Gate, I have a pretty decent rig. I've done everything I can to make sure that the processor is not overheating and like I'm not experiencing chug when I go into a new area. But when you go into Baldur's Gate, there's so much data that like even the best thing you can do, you still experience a little bit of chug, at least on my end. That said, it's like the only time I've experienced any kind of like processing issues. I did, as somebody who played in the alpha, I was a little disappointed at how they scaled back character creation. It used to be that Larian would call out the fan base and be like, you guys are making these characters too boring. So, like, I would try and make, like, a neon pink Githyanki with a purple afro and the biggest bulbous nose you can put on a Githyanki. Like, I don't feel like I have that option anymore. So I'm thinking that they scaled it back, or at least it feels that way.
I did not really love the character creation. I mean, it was fun, but I also feel like Larian could have actually done so much more than what they ended up giving us. I am pretty active in the subreddit r/gamergirls, and everyone was posting their avatars and stuff. But to me, they kind of all looked the same because you just really have a very limited set of like preset faces. Some decisions that I felt were kind of weird, like why are there only 2 body types, but then there's like 5 different dicks that you can have on there, and just like kind of little things like that. Yeah, I mean, the system was robust enough to create like the character that you wanted for the game, or at least it was for me, but I definitely would have appreciated like some sliders or at least some more options.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Yeah. I've noticed maybe I'm more basic than I thought, but I built a Dragonborn. I made him look as cool as I wanted him to look. I gave him like this cool beard of horns and like this cool like horn setup. And like I go online and every Dragonborn I've seen looks exactly like the one I just made.
Oh no. Well, that's what I'm saying.
Like to your point, like it does feel like I'm not the unique little snowflake that I think I am when it comes to these like character creations, which is a bit of a bummer, but at the same time, like I'm still having fun with the character. I also this was something that got patched out was like player sexual characters that went a little too hard. I'm looking at you, Gail. I think we all do. They patched that out because it was a bug. Like the last thing I'll say. Some story-driven triggers felt very unnatural. I'm just dungeon diving, doing a side quest, and then suddenly the plot shows up, and like it gets jarring in a bad way. And like I feel like I need to be making these checks and saves that I was not prepared for, which I realize is kind of the point of these things, but also Come on, like this didn't need to happen right this second. This could have happened literally anywhere else.
There were points where some of the triggers felt very random. Whether they were or not, like I agree with you completely that it was jarring and out of place.
We're 15 minutes into this conversation. I honestly, that's all I can come up with in terms of like negative, any form of negativity. These are in the grand scheme of a game that is 100+ hours. This is nothing. I've got a list longer for the for the positives. Holy crap! Holy crap!
Okay, well, before we dive into like the meat and potatoes of the game, I think it's worth talking about some of the circumstances surrounding the game, like Wizards and how they are taking credit for the success of Baldur's Gate 3, even though it was largely unearned on their part.
Absolutely agreed. Everything I see in terms of ads, like it's always like Wizards of the Coast and Larian, and you're just like, all you did was sign a piece of paper that said they were allowed to do this. You guys didn't really contribute to anything in terms of, well, anything. The alpha was where the money came from, so that was their like pick me up. This is all Lyrian. This is like the blood, sweat, and tears of a development. It's not a big AAA like Nintendo or EA or Activision or anything like that. I don't see any of Hasbro's greed or Wizards like, hey, how can we screw over the player for more money? So that tells me that they had little to nothing to do with the development process. This is all Lyrian, so Lyrian deserves the pat on the back, and I hope that they're reaping the rewards of their hard work.
Even in the general discourse I've seen surrounding the game, because Baldur's Gate 3 kind of hit such a mainstream audience so hard, rather than just that typical niche CRPG, D&D fan audience, because they hit such a mainstream audience, I found all these people who were only kind of like tangentially interested, who are like, oh, Wizards did a really good job on this game, or just like completely giving Wizards of the Coast the credit for this. And it's really funny to me. And I definitely see Wizards leaning into that too.
General public, if you want to see a Wizards produced game, look no further than Dark Alliance 2 that came out like 2 years ago. That came and went like a fart in the wind, man.
Oh, I was actually looking forward to that one because I liked the original Dark Alliance games, and that was disappointing.
I'm right there with you. I was also looking forward to it, but it hit such a bad nerve. Unpolished. It looked like every other game that came out that year in terms of like fantasy.
Yeah, how do you take one of the most successful IPs in the world and then create a game that has literally no identity to it?
They found a way. I do want to make one thing very clear. It's something we discussed. We discussed briefly on the previous episode. We discussed how this game was making developers kind of scared. Like this is the new. This isn't something you should expect from games moving forward. As somebody who's buying these products, yes, it is. I hold no grudge against the actual game developers themselves. It's the publishers who are basically telling us to stoke our expectations. They're doing their impression of Bob Iger where they're like, oh, well, they're expecting too much and they're not going to get it going forward. It's like, that just means you're making a shit product and you should reap the repercussions of making a shit product. Going into the starting up the game, it immediately transports you, whether or not you realize it, into this idea that you're going somewhere else. And it's as quick as the EULA, which I loved. I actually read a EULA for the first time before I got into it because it reads like a pact with a demon. I loved that. I had so much fun reading it. I was dying. Going in and exploring for the first time the new races, the new classes. God, I don't know where to begin. So before I make a fool out of myself, please take over.
Yeah, well, I had so much fun just in that character creation portion. I spent almost 2 hours just shuffling between the different races, the classes, the subclasses, looking at like all the different imagery and stuff, trying to figure out like what I'd want to play as. And just from that opening character creation, already having a good time. And then jumping into the game, the opening cinematic, like what you were saying about pulling you into another world. Oh my gosh, they literally pulled us into another world. Several of them. It was amazing.
Even in the early access version of the game, like we got those cinematics, and to see it evolve from the alpha to where it is right now is such a treat. It's like, but I imagine this is what a parent must feel like watching their kid grow up. Where like I am proud of them. Like it goes from like this kind of goofy looking animatic to a full experience, and one that pulls you in very quickly and doesn't let go. Like I feel like you don't actually get to breathe in that opening. Like you're just like you feel the need to go. Like you're on a you're on a ship that's crashing through hell. You want to get out of there as quickly as possible. I like the quality of life that they brought to the multiplayer. It's super minute things like being able to ping, which you weren't able to do in the alpha. I was worried that they wouldn't do that because I didn't know Larian's pedigree at this time.
I remember you pinging objects when we were playing in our multiplayer game, and I was like, yes, that's awesome.
Being able to fast travel to your companions in one of my many, many multiplayer games. I was talking to I think I was talking to the tieflings in the Emerald Enclave, and as I'm talking to them, in the course of me talking to them, because my group we all went in at the same time, my buddy goes, "Hey, I started a cult and I'm fighting the owlbear, but I'm down. Can you come get me?" In the course of a single conversation, this happens. So, like, I got to I got to be able to like leave that conversation fairly quickly, and then go and help my friend who was, as he said, face down in the dirt in front of the owlbear, and like he had like an imp and had I guess was in the process of making a cult for himself. I don't know how. He has never. I had no explanation.
Was there anything that really like surprised you or delighted you with the game?
Everything. The thing that I think makes it stand out in terms of just being easy, not only a fun gaming experience, but a fun D&D experience, is the amount of creativity you command as a player. I can think of a few examples, but the two that immediately jump to mind. Act 2 in the Shadow area. I got a group of Shar worshippers who are a bitch and a half to fight, I have to say. I got to avoid a fight entirely and convince them to kill themselves. And I didn't have to fight them, but I got all of their loot and their experience. I like, just talking to them avoided combat in a way that makes sense to Shar worshippers, but at the same time, like, it saves the player some much needed HP, and for that area in particular. And my personal favorite, and one I think I will always remember this game for, is I was fighting the Necromancer in that same area, and every time I fought him, every time, it was a bloodbath. Like, he starts off with Cloudward Kill, and my whole, like, half of my party goes down. So I'm spending, like, most of the time picking them back up and going after it time and time and time and time and time again. And on the umpteenth time, I'm going through my inventory, I'm looking at what I have, and I notice Shadowheart has Polymorph. I not only polymorphed him, I polymorphed him and threw him into the fucking void, like the piece of shit he is. So I didn't have to, like, I didn't invoke combat once. It just, like, poof, and then I had Karlach pick him up and throw him off the side of the island I was on, and he just fell into the abyss forever. And every time you're going to find a new way to do things.
And then there's so many things that are just in all the nooks and corners of the map. Like, thinking about my first two, like, sessions playing the game of clearing Act 1, and then I play with you, and suddenly I run into those trolls that you can, they're like the talking ogre in the goblin camp, where you can convince him to like give you his horn. And I mean, that was amazing. And I had already played through Act 1 twice and never found that until that playthrough. And there's just tons of little scenes like that in the game.
It's so much fun. I did that for a friend of mine who she played the game to a point where she knew almost everything in that first act, and I had gotten to a certain. We had you fight the hag, and once you kill her, if you have speak with animals on, there's a little frog that's just hopping around that will reward you for killing the hag. She didn't know about that, and she had 300 hours more than me in the game. Speaking of which, for my solo playthrough I just saw last night, I have, according to Steam, I have 150 hours logged. And my solo run is at hour 68. And I do want to say that that is another positive I gave this game, is that I might be 68 hours in. Without hesitation of saying that, without, like, worrying that I might be, like, overhyping this. Every hour brought something new to the table. This is an experience. Until the end of this game, I will continue to have something new thrown at me that you haven't experienced, that maybe a friend of mine has, and we can just gush about it. And like that's just it too. It's like, this is such a water cooler game. You get to, like, ooh, if you know somebody who's playing, you look them dead in the eye and you be like, okay, so where are you? And you, like, sip on your coffee as they're talking about where they are, what they've seen, and then you go, wait a minute, you found the kobold in the graveyard, and that's just this game. And, like, it allows for social activity in a way that I think makes this the best D&D module not written. There are games out right now in book form that aren't nearly as good as what this game is. And that's both a good and bad thing for Wizards. The story is engaging. The side quests never once feel like busy work. I love this game. Game of the year, no question.
You know, that's so novel these days, isn't it? A company wanting to make a game that's actually good and not just profitable.
I've been called out a few times for maybe overhyping it, and I don't know that I am. I'm excited to, like, kind of share it with other people, but I don't know that I necessarily, like, yeah, I can overhype. I know when maybe I need to, like, pull it in a little bit, and maybe it's like, oh, maybe this isn't the game for them. I don't know that I've ever once been, like, talked to somebody who doesn't enjoy TTRPGs and been like, oh, you know what, this might not be a game for you. In fact, if anything, it's been the other way around, where people have surprised me. I think you mentioned, like, it hitting when it hit the open market, there were more people that don't necessarily play D&D that were kind of getting interested in it. Yeah, one of my coworkers who is, like...
One of my coworkers, too. I found out. I was super surprised. Continue.
Actually, you know what? I talked about this already on the last episode, so please tell your story. I'm very curious.
Yeah, well, my coworker, she's like early 20s and super cool. I love working with her. But she's also very much not the type of person I would have expected to be into gaming, let alone Baldur's Gate 3. But because of how, like, mainstream of an audience this game is hitting, it definitely came across her path, and she's been having a wonderful time with that.
That's another thing I wanted to talk about as a positive for this game, is the voice cast. They are such great stewards for this game, if you don't mind me taking what is essentially... that's not something I often say. I feel like you say that for us more often than not. They have done everything to make this game more appealing. And that's from their cameos, the app. That's from them appearing on, like, D&D podcasts to talk about, or not, to play as their characters. And they just seem like so much fun.
Yeah, got that an advertisement on YouTube about them playing in a D&D. Here it is. Baldur's Gate 3 cast play D&D #1 on High Rollers D&D channel.
Yes. I need to watch it, and the fact that it's #1 out of God knows how many, I am so curious to see
Yeah.
like how
Are they about to have an ongoing campaign?
a rival to Critical Role.
Uh-oh.
We'll see.
Uh-oh.
We'll see. I'm not that worried about that. But if anybody could do it.
Oh, well, just talking about like the cast playing D&D now is really just an incredible moment for D&D fans in so many ways. Like with the movie that came out earlier this year, shows like Critical Role, this game Baldur's Gate 3 being so phenomenal. Put aside WotC like cutting off their nose to spite their face, like this is kind of an exciting time to be a fan for sure.
The way that they were going to do things was a huge failure. Everything from what they were trying to pull with 6th edition to what they were doing with Magic the Gathering, like sicking literally the Pinkertons on your fans.
Yeah, that's some capitalist dystopia bullshit that we're living through.
Yeah, like I didn't sign up to be in Cyberpunk. What the hell? Because like you have to appeal to these companies with your wallet, and when you do things like this, one of two things is going to happen. One, you're going to listen, and you're going to make the product that the fans are asking for, or you're going to do things your own way, ignore the fans, and basically allow somebody else to take your place. God knows there are other options out there. There are so many other TTRPGs out there. If for some reason D&D, like a high fantasy game, doesn't speak to you, which I totally get, there is so much else out there. Monster of the Week, Trash Pandas versus Humans, I think is one I just saw, which seems like a fun... You play as a raccoon and you're just invading a house. That's the whole TTRPG, and the whole thing is like a pamphlet long. It's crazy. There are so many games out there that if Wizards is not careful, the fans will abandon this. But we will look back on things that they did properly, like the Dungeons & Dragons movie, like Baldur's Gate 3, and be like, damn, they really had something going on there. Oh well. That said, you are absolutely right. This is the best time to be a fan of Dungeons & Dragons. And I think that it has nothing to do with our corporate overlords. I think it's everything to do with the fans.
You know what? Okay, so do you want to play a little game and then we can wrap up?
Absolutely.
Okay, so kind of like we did with Legend of Vox Machina, I wanted to
I saw it coming.
You better have. You better have.
Oh, no.
Because this game is so horny on its own. Let's jump into Bedwetter Dead, Baldur's Gate 3 edition.
Let's go. Let's fucking go.
Okay, well, I'll kick it off and then you can let me know what your picks are. This was a really tough one for me. I think that I would wed Astarion because if you go his good path, I think he just has a lot of really redeeming things in his character. You know what? I take it back. Okay. Thinking about how much I love Astarion, I think he would be better off as a friend. So I'm going to keep him over on the side. I am going to marry Shadowheart. I'm going to fuck Lae'zel, and I'm going to kill Gale.
Poor Gale. But yes.
You know, I was so interested in his storyline at first, and then he just kind of, I don't know. I feel like he's like a crackhead, and I just can't bring myself to get involved with that.
Okay, for the women, like I feel like each character is so endearing in their own way, very interesting. I gotta wed Shadowheart because that was my first romance in this game.
Shadowheart is such a great character. She has like this strong and self-assured presence, but she's also like vulnerable and going through her own character arc. She was very well written, very compelling.
I gotta go for Karlach for fuck because I love her character. She's so She's so spicy and fun and just an interesting character to be around. You know what? I'm gonna throw Will under the bus. I would kill Will. I didn't find him like it. Okay, he is your vanilla "I've come to save the day" character, and he might be illiterate because like he didn't read that contract very well. But a lot of the guy characters were not particularly like, there was nothing where I was like, I would romance him immediately. Like, the only time that was not true, I would also wed Halcyon.
So when I played my version of the game, like my full playthrough, solo playthrough, it was my darkest timeline, Derek. Like I rolled poorly on like with Lae'zel, ended up having to kill Lae'zel, ended up having to kill Will, and then I lost Halcyon because of the stuff in Act 2. I never got Jaheira. She died while storming Moon Tower. Just and that's not even like, that's just like the early stuff. Like things that happened to me in Act 3 were way worse. But I let it happen because I thought it would be kind of interesting just to see how the game plays even under those conditions. And I'm very excited for my next playthrough where I can maybe spend a little more time trying to get the good outcomes on stuff too.
Well, I think with that out of the way, maybe this is the time. If you guys liked what you heard, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. We want to hear everything you have to talk about Baldur's Gate. Put it in the comments. If you've played it, if you haven't played it, if you're on the fence about it, let us know. It's been an experience. Obviously, we love the game. I'm rooting for it for Game of the Year. I liked making it. But again, guys, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Be sure to take care of yourselves out there, folks.